Hello, my name is Annie Virnig, and I coordinate UN Biodiversity Lab for the United Nations Development Program. Great, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So in this short presentation, I'll first provide some framing around why we at UNDP see spatial data as so essential to global priorities around biodiversity and sustainable development. I'll then introduce some of the work we've done around our UN Biodiversity Lab platform and show how this might be relevant to SIDS. And I'll wrap up by talking about some of our next steps and new projects that we're really excited to share. All right, let's get started. So let me start with a very basic question. Why is spatial data important? And I want to answer this question by taking a step back and painting a picture of our world today. No matter where we work, no matter where we look, we are confronting a profound unraveling of the planet. If we look to the landmark report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we see that we have now only 10 years to take action to avoid the catastrophic impacts of climate change. The parallel report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, released just last year, showed that we're seeing unparalleled declines in biodiversity, with over 1 million species at risk of extinction. These twin threats, loss of biodiversity and climate change, are some of the defining issues of our time, with cascading ripple effects, including what we're seeing all around us today with the current COVID-19 pandemic. So as we're confronted with these issues, how can we take tangible action? For us, this is where spatial data comes in. We see spatial data as a powerful tool that can identify both where and how we can take action on biodiversity, climate, and sustainable development. Not only this, but spatial data can provide us with key tools for monitoring and transparency around efforts worldwide to achieve key international agreements such as the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Nature-Based Sustainable Development Goals. However, despite this power of spatial data to support action and to monitor the impacts of these actions, at UNDP we found there to be a gap between the potential for spatial data and the ability of policymakers to actually use it. So let me tell you a little story. This is based on an analysis we conducted back in 2018. So imagine I am your average government policymaker, and I'm looking at my country's national biodiversity plan to try to identify where I can take action for nature. On average, I'll find 4 maps in this plan, and one of these maps will be the political boundaries of my country itself. So this isn't very many. This is very few, especially when we compare with the massive amounts of spatial data that are being generated at national and global levels. So what's the gap? Why isn't spatial data making it into these key plans or into the equivalent reports under the Convention on Biological Diversity? We set out to answer this with the countries that we work with. So in 2018, we conducted a needs assessment with over 60 parties to the CBD, asking them why spatial data wasn't being used to implement and report on their commitments to the convention. And they came back with 4 very clear answers. First, data are inaccessible. They're often fragmented between different ministries or data providers and require complex data sharing agreements. Second, even if they are accessible, some data are not usable. This might be because they're out of date, because they're too coarse of resolution, or a variety of other issues. Third, accessible, usable data may not be nationally validated. And this is incredibly important for some of the governments we work with. In order to be used for government purposes, data must be officially validated for use. It could be the best data set in the world. If it hasn't gone through this process, it cannot be used by government. And finally, the fourth obstacle was that even for data that are accessible, usable, and validated, many governments lack the capacity to be able to access, analyze, and use the data in meaningful ways to meet their priorities. So what we found here was really a gap between the potential for spatial data to be used and the capacity of policymakers to actually use it. So I want to take a moment here and use one of these cool Zoom features to launch a poll. So you should see this popping up on your screen. I'm curious to know, out of our participants here today, how many of you have encountered some of the issues that I described here? So I'll give you about 20 seconds to add in your responses and submit them, and then I'll share back the responses with the group. You can select one or multiple answers to this poll. All right. So it seems like at least some of you are experiencing similar issues in your countries. So as we thought about how to work with countries to increase access and use of spatial data, UNDP and UN Environment issued a challenge to all parties. We asked them to double the number of maps between their 5th national report and their 6th national report to the Convention on Biological Diversity. But we didn't issue this challenge in a vacuum. We've launched a wide range of capacity building activities and our flagship spatial data platform, UN Biodiversity Lab. So for most of the remainder of this presentation, I'll give you a quick overview of the functionalities available through UN Biodiversity Lab and talk about how this could be useful for small island developing states. All right, so simple question. What is UN Biodiversity Lab? We created this free open source platform in 2018 specifically to support policymakers around their commitments to the CBD. The platform provides over 115 global spatial data layers to the governments we work with, and the ability to access them without any GIS expertise. Over the past 2 years, we've grown a deep policy-relevant user base with over 300 policymakers active from 61 countries. We also want to use the platform as a way to make spatial data widely accessible to diverse stakeholders, and we've had over 35,000 views of the public site. Moving forward, we're really interested to hear how we can support different user groups and meet their needs. So please send us your feedback and your questions about the platform. All right. So final question, what sets us apart? I'm sure many of you are aware of many different amazing spatial data platforms that are out there, whether it's Resource Watch, Global Forest Watch, World Environmental Situation Room, or many others. We see 4 key areas that set us apart with UN Biodiversity Lab. The first is that through our work to support countries specifically around their commitments to the CBD, we have unique political mandate and relevancy. Second, UNDP and UN Environment's connections provide access to users in diverse countries around the world. Third, we offer private national workspaces to support contextual conservation action. I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. And finally, through these workspaces, we offer a way to engage relevant stakeholders to better share and use data. So I'm going to quickly run you through 5 key features of UN Biodiversity Lab and highlight a few aspects that are particularly relevant for SIDS. So first, through the platform, you can access 116 of the world's best data layers on biodiversity, protected areas, and sustainable development. Now, we know that many global data layers are not great for SIDS. They're not high enough resolution, there are issues with cloud cover. However, our spatial data expert Scott Atkinson has worked with numerous SIDS to support them in the preparation of their 6th national report. Up next, he'll share a little bit about the key global data layers that might be most useful to all of you in your work. Second, through the platform, we provide priority access to new NASA data produced on forest cover. This is for a range of countries with tropical forests and include a few SIDS, so we encourage you to check this out. Third, and this really gets to the heart of the site, we offer private national workspaces where countries can upload their national data, invite collaborators, and visualize it in combination with relevant global data. We know from many SIDS that you have high quality national and regional data, and see these private projects as a key way to support you to collect this data and engage with relevant stakeholders in your country in order to compile a database of relevant spatial data for biodiversity action, monitoring, and reporting. Fourth, through using the site, you can conduct basic analyses and create beautiful maps. And fifth, you can use our story maps feature to be able to communicate your conservation successes to diverse user groups. All right, so this was the speediest of speedy overviews. We encourage you to check out a technical training we recently did partnering with NASA RSIT that dives much deeper into a lot of the issues that I have just covered today. So to wrap up, I just want to talk about what's coming next for us. So working with 5 pilot countries, we're using spatial data to help us identify what we call essential life support areas. These are locations that are essential for both biodiversity and human well-being. And we're working with some of the world's best scientists to help us identify where action can be taken, where nature-based actions can be taken to deliver across national priorities in these areas. On this slide, you can see our first essential life support area map for Costa Rica, which shows where action in the country to protect, manage, restore, and green urban spaces can deliver across 5 priority targets that they identified working with our team. We're continuing to roll out this project throughout the year, and so stay tuned for results from all of our different pilot countries about how they're taking action around their essential life support areas. So with that, I will say thank you and turn it back over to you.